Hello everyone, this is Dr. Hashem of Serhan. I'm excited today to kick off a new series where I will be breaking down the basic clinical science course complete set from the American Academy of Ophthalmology in a simple, interactive, and hopefully fun way that you will actually enjoy. Whether you are just starting out or reviewing, this series is designed to make things clearer and easier to remember. If you have any suggestions or topics you would like me to cover, drop them in the comments. I would love to hear from you, and don't forget to stay tuned for the upcoming videos. So we'll start today from the cornea and external disease book, and the first topic will be the adenovirus conjunctivitis. So this interactive way mainly depends on interaction between me and you. So you will start to memorize and try to figure out the information from the slides in very fun way that you will enjoy. So about the adenoviral conjunctivitis, transmitted through three ways. Do you remember them? It's transmitted via the close contact with ocular or respiratory secretions, fomites, and contaminated swimming pools. So you need to know the transmission ways of the adenoviral conjunctivitis. And don't forget the eye dentist. What does this mean? Is adenovirus conjunctivitis transmissible via the routine eye exam maneuvers? Yes, most commonly through the applanation tonometer and drop installation. So if you say that I always wipe down my Goldman tip with an alcohol swab, so no worries, right? Actually, no. Adenovirus is very tough, like a sucker that can survive alcohol. So what steps can be taken to avoid this? There are two steps mainly. First step is to sterilize the tip by soaking it in dilute bleach. But this dilute bleach should be for 5 to 10 minutes. If you use this way of sterilization, what fifth step is really important. Thoroughly ionizing the tip prior to touching the patient eye with it, because we have seen a corneal bleach burn from failing to do so. It's not pretty, and the patient will not be happy. So this second way of sterilization to prevent adenovirus transmission is to check the IUP with an instrument that employs a condom, so there is a protective barrier. There is a certain very general sort of population is at a particular risk for adenoviral conjunctivitis. Do you know them? They are people living in close quarters. Can you give me any examples? There are 4 examples in the cornea book from the American Academy: the school kids, the military personnel, the nursing home residents, and the summer camp attendees. So these close quarters, those population is at particular risk for adenovirus conjunctivitis epidemic. For how long is a symptomatic individual infectious? For 10 to 14 days, almost 2 weeks after the onset of the signs and symptoms. And what can be done to reduce the risk of transmission? There are 3 ways to reduce the risk of transmission: very careful hand washing, and no sharing of towels, bedding, etc., and isolation of infected individuals. How many classic adenovirus ocular symptoms are there? Do you know them? If you know them, please speak aloud. There are 3 ocular symptoms. Can you mention them? These are the follicular conjunctivitis, the pharyngoconjunctival fever, and the epidemic keratoconjunctivitis. So why isn't it the acute hemorrhagic conjunctivitis on this list? Because It's not caused by adenovirus because acute hemorrhagic conjunctivitis is caused by enterovirus or Coxsackie virus. So don't confuse between them. If follicular conjunctivitis is mild transient disease and actually there is no management need. It will go by itself. For the pharyngoconjunctival fever, do you know the serotypes that cause the pharyngoconjunctival fever? 3 and 7. Don't forget them. And they are triad of follicular conjunctivitis from the name, and pharyngitis, and high fever with adenopathy, cervical lymphadenopathy. It looks like actually flu, so it's flu-like symptoms, but it caused by the adenovirus. AC is the only syndrome with significant corneal involvement. Don't forget kerato. It's kerato corneal involvement plus conjunctivitis. Do you know the serotypes that cause epidemic keratoconjunctivitis? They are very important. 8, 1937. So 8 and 1937 are the three serotypes that cause AKC, and they may be preceded by upper respiratory tract infection. And the second eye involved usually in 3 to 7 days. So from 3 to 7 days, usually there is second eye involved. Interestingly, one eye tends to have a significantly milder presentation than the other. Which one, the first eye or the second eye? It's the second eye. So the stages of the epidemic keratoconjunctivitis first started with upper respiratory tract infection, and after 1 week there is severe follicular or papillary conjunctivitis, severe follicular conjunctivitis. And this is the follicular conjunctivitis, this is the follicular reaction as you see it here in the conjunctiva. And it's not uncommon for the conch to not appear particularly follicular-ish in the AKC. Why is that? Because there is so chemosis that follicular morphology is obscure. So what is the ominous sign of this stage, the second follicular conjunctivitis? Do you know that? It's the edema across the ocular surface, including the conch, the caruncle, the plica. And what will patients complain at this stage? They will complain of tearing, foreign body sensation, photophobia. And the slit lamp of the anterior segment examination will reveal punctate epithelial keratopathy. And is this the extent of corneal involvement at this point? Actually, unfortunately, sadly, no. Patient actually may develop large geographic corneal erosions that persist for several days. This anterior segment photograph of AKC patient showing large epithelial defect, and this picture showing the resolution of the epithelial defect after 3 days from the initial presentation. So the slit lamp examination of the second stage of the epidemic keratoconjunctivitis, the severe follicular conjunctivitis, will show the first one is punctate epithelial keratopathy. The second one is petechial hemorrhages plus minus subconjunctival hemorrhage. And you see in this picture there is petechial hemorrhage in the conjunctiva, and there is also here petechial hemorrhage surrounding the follicles, and here the subconjunctival hemorrhage. These are ominous signs of the severe follicular conjunctivitis. The third one is conjunctival membranes or pseudomembranes. This triad is a hallmark of the follicular conjunctivitis seen in the AKC. And these are the membranes, conjunctival membranes seen in the AKC. What are the composition of the pseudo or membranes of the conjunctiva seen in the adenoviral conjunctivitis? Fibrin, mucin, and inflammatory cells. Where are they most likely to be found? The tarsal conj. And if you see a patient with conjunctival membrane or pseudomembrane, what does this indicate? This indicates that you should invert the upper lid in order to check for the membrane. Don't forget to flip the upper lid, because many new residents will miss this point and forget to flip the lid and will forget to peel the membrane, which cause delaying in the healing and not resolving the symptoms. So what is the key difference between the membrane and pseudomembrane? The main key difference is how adherent they are to the ocular surface. Can you tell which you are dealing with, pseudomembrane or membrane? By peeling it. Once you peel, you will know, is it membrane or pseudomembrane? If the underlying bed bleeds, it was a true membrane. If it doesn't bleed, so it's pseudomembrane. So why should you bother peeling them to find out? As I said before, because the pseudomembranes and true membranes present very different long-term prognosis. True membranes can lead to conjunctival scarring, which in turn can produce three clinically deleterious outcomes. The first one is symphyron formation. The second one is loss of the conjunctival goblet cells, and therefore dry eye disease secondary to mucin deficiency. And the third one is aqueous deficient dry eye disease, dry eye syndrome, or dry eye disease that can happen because of the scarring compromising the lacrimal gland ducts. So it's very important to peel them. It's not just treating the eye dentist, it's preventing the complication, these deleterious outcomes. So what is the non-ocular sign that will be present? Is the pre-auricular lymphadenopathy as seen in this picture. It's very important to check for the lymph nodes in patients. So we finish from the severe follicular conjunctivitis, the second stage. It can be followed from 1 to 2 weeks by subepithelial infiltrate. It's not uncommon sequelae of adenoviral conjunctivitis. The subepithelial infiltrates, are they unifocal, single, or multifocal? They are multifocal. Are they small, medium, or large in size? They are medium size. So this picture showing subepithelial infiltrates and medium size caused by adenovirus. Where are they located? In the subepithelial space? It's called subepithelial or anterior stromal space. Actually, either one or both can locate subepithelial or anterior stromal or both. The main point that they are superficial. And this photo showing subepithelial infiltrate medium size caused by adenovirus, and the slit beam section showing that they are superficial in the subepithelial space or anterostromal space. Do you know what they are the most common complaints that are associated with subepithelial infiltrate? Photophobia and decreased vision. If a patient with a history of viral conjunctivitis came to you after 2 weeks complaining of photophobia, decreased vision, you should put the subepithelial infiltrate in one of the main differential for the patient. How long do the subepithelial infiltrates persist? Usually highly variable, but months and even years are not uncommon, unfortunately. They can persist for months and even years. So coming now to the important point, what is the management? So usually the management is supportive. Artificial tears with cold compresses. And if you see membranes, you should peel them with plus minus steroids. What are the indications of topical steroids in the adenoviral conjunctivitis if the case is severe? And what does this mean? Defined by three things. The first thing is severe photophobia. The second thing, conj membrane. If you see membrane, you should give the patient with the steroids. and bilateral subepithelial infiltrate that are causing reduced vision. So these are the main considerations of topical steroids in the cases of epidemic keratoconjunctivitis. What are the two drawbacks of steroid therapy? It prolongs the virus shedding, so it can increase the recovery period, and because it masks the signs and symptoms, it makes it difficult to determine whether the patient is still contagious. What about topical? Now, topical NSAIDs, non-steroid therapy, are they effective in adenovirus conjunctivitis? Actually, it might help with symptoms, but they don't do nothing. They do nothing for the subepithelial infiltrate. What about the topical cyclosporines? The Cornea book says it may be considered when other therapies fail. You can give it a trial. So, adenoviral conjunctivitis can cause follicular conjunctivitis, mild disease, rarely seen in the clinic. Pharyngoconjunctival fever looks like the flu, and epidemic keratoconjunctivitis, bilateral follicular conjunctivitis with petechial hemorrhages and conj membranes with corneal involvement and lymphadenopathy.